In this video, I'm going to give you the building blocks that you need to build the perfect custom GPT for your use case. Now, the word perfect means a lot of things to a lot of different people. So the goal of this video is to equip you with the tips and tricks that you need to get your perfect desired outcome. I'm going to go through 6 different ways that you can approach building a custom GPT, and you'll be super surprised with what you could do with the 6th one. If you want a little teaser, check this out. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, it's going great. Thanks for asking. How about you? What's on your mind today?
Yeah, can you tell me all the memories you have stored for Mark?
Here's what I have stored for Mark. His name is Mark Kashef, and he goes by Mark. He lives in Canada. He loves LLMs, large language models. Let me know if there's anything you'd like to update or explore further.
No, could you just add one more thing, that he's very mediocre at building custom GPTs?
Got it. I've added that Mark is very mediocre at building custom GPTs. Anything else you'd like to include?
No, that's it. And no, that was not a voice agent. That was a custom GPT using the audio function on the mobile app. So if you want to stick around and find out how to build that, I'm going to walk you through it step by step. If we haven't met before, my name is Mark, and I've been running my own AI automation agency called Prompt Advisors for the past 2 years. We work with companies in every industry to understand where AI fits best in their workflows. I have a background in data science and AI, so I try to marry the academic with the business person. Now I'm going to first flip to some slides to break down those 6 different methods of building a custom GPT, and then we'll go behind the curtain to see how we put together that little demo I just showed you. Let's dive right in. So to make this more playful, let's imagine these 6 different methods as 6 doors that we have to unlock together. And obviously the one of interest is, how do we recreate that Jarvis-like experience using just a custom GPT? We'll start at the least complex use cases and then build our way up to the final one. Before we go behind door number 1, I think it's really important to look at the very big picture when dealing not just with custom GPTs, but LLMs in general. One of the most important things to remember or know, if you're not aware, is that all of these models in their nature are probabilistic, meaning they're not quote unquote smart, and they don't quote unquote learn from you uploading a bunch of documents and saying, learn it. The way that large language models work is that they do their best to guess what your desired outcome is based on the prompt you put together, which is why prompt engineering is so important. Based on how you structure your prompt, the specific words you use, the fat that you cut from all the bloating in the prompt, that's why prompt engineering is so important. It's all about how do you structure your commands, instructions, and examples in a way that increase the likelihood that it guesses correctly. If you change your mindset from LLMs are smart and they learn things to LLMs guess things, then the way you approach prompting and building a custom GPT will be wildly different. You're basically trying to spoon feed some hints and clues to increase the likelihood that custom GPTs give you the answer they're looking for. And the reason I focus so much on prompt engineering on this channel is typically all kinds of applications, whether it be a custom GPT or a web application, all have the same problem, where there's either too much prompt or too little prompt, or too vague of a prompt or too assumptive of a prompt, meaning someone's assuming that this new model is so smart that it knows exactly what they want and can read their minds, when it's actually your job to guide the LLM to what your desired outcome is. Now with that in mind, we can now go behind door number 1. Now behind door number 1, we have a very common use case, which is a style and tone assistant. This is all about either distilling your brand voice, your company's brand voice, or a colleague's brand voice, so you can easily upload a file or give some form of instruction like, hey, generate me this email, generate me this blog post, generate me this new product announcement, and it will write it in your quote unquote style of either writing and embed basically your voice inside the actual text. The general structure you want to take with this is you have some form of role assignment. And the reason why all these role assignments where you say you are this or you are that are very popular and common is, if you go back to what we just talked about, when you tell the LLM or custom GPT what it should role play as, it increases the likelihood or the probability that it will know what the desired outcome is. So if you keep connecting probability to what the assignments are, you'll understand why these pieces of the prompt actually exist. So you can say something like, you are a writing expert specializing in style and tone, and your job is to help refine writing so it feels, insert some form of variable. And then ideally you give some examples for it to learn from. So when it comes to examples to provide, it's not about uploading 10 different documents or injecting 10 different examples in the prompt, because just because you add more doesn't mean it gets better. Ideally, pick somewhere between 2 to 4 different examples that you provide that say, hey, here's example number 1, here's 2, and here's 3. And ideally, they're different enough to capture the different elements of your voice or your brand voice. When it comes to examples and doing some monkey see, monkey do, less is definitely more. And one thing you'll see consistently in all of these examples is I like to always end with final instructions for the AI, which could be formatting related, which is remember to always output between 1 to 2 pages. Always avoid words like XYZ. Let's say you don't want to say standard words like delve or seamlessly and all the recurring words that LLMs love to print out. This type of GPT typically takes some iteration where ideally you create what's called a meta prompt. And if you don't know what that is, I have tons of videos about it, where you have a new ChatGPT window that says, hey, you are a prompt engineer. Here's the prompt that I gave the other GPT window that I have open. Here are my flaws with it, or here are my issues with it. It's not capturing my voice correctly. It keeps using the wrong words. So I typically have 2 tabs open. One that is my custom GPT prompt that I'm actually writing, and the other that is my tester and editor, where I go and vent about why that first custom GPT prompt is not working well enough. So in your second tab, if you say, hey, you are a prompt engineer, I'm going to provide you with my prompt that I created for my custom GPT, and here are all my grievances or my complaints about how it's not working. If you go back and forth and you tell it, hey, output in a code block, you'll be able to easily copy paste it until you're actually happy with that custom GPT. This is a hack I use with myself and client GPTs that we put together because it helps us get to that final mile where you want that perfection. So that was door number 1. Let's go into door number 2. So this is similar to the first in the fact that there's not too much action going on in terms of API calls or anything fancy. This is just a different frame of a custom GPT, where you frame it more in, hey, help me prepare for this interview, or help me respond to these customer inquiries that we're getting, or help me with this sales script, right? And in this case, you have a different role assignment, which is you are a conversation coach, or you are a customer service helper, that kind of thing. Your job is to guide users through and then desired outcome. The next one is examples to learn from. Again, this is going to be consistent from custom GPT to custom GPT. One thing I really like to do in this use case is I like to actually give in quotes examples of ideal responses to questions. And if you want to go fancy, I would give it in quotes questions received from customers and then answers or ideal answers to those questions. Now, I used to be hesitant that maybe adding quotes into a custom GPT would force it to actually follow those quotes verbatim. But typically, if I just say, hey, here are some examples to be inspired by on how you should handle these conversations, it's good enough to quote unquote generalize how it should deal with new scenarios it hasn't seen before. As an expert tip, one thing I love to do is integrate what are called conversation starters into my custom GPT. Now, you might think it's because it's a better user experience, it helps people understand what they can ask, and that's one very small part of it. The main thing I noticed is that if I created conversation starters and then integrated verbatim those conversation starters in my prompt, there was a high likelihood of getting similar experiences every time. If we take an example here, like write me 1,000-word analysis on the future of GPT. What I would do is I would put this in quotes, put it in the prompt and say, when the user says, and then this statement, then do the following. And then in bullets, here are different things that you should do. And what I noticed is that when I linked the conversation starter and put it into the prompt itself, it increased the likelihood that I would get the same experience when I click those 4 buttons. So if you have a workflow that you think you can fit between 1 to 4 different conversation starters, that is an ultimate hack to help you stay on track and keep the custom GPT on track as well. All right, and on to door number 3. So this one is meant to be slightly different, where instead of just providing you some form of output, which is a generated email, a generated response, this is meant to be more of an interactive experience, where there's a bit of back and forth, and in the prompt itself, the biggest differentiator here, and I won't go over these two, you'll have access to these slides as well as a Notion template that I put together in the bottom of the description below. So I'm just going to focus on the key part here. So when it comes to the instructions for the AI, I like to tell it, hey, try and not just be playful when you go back and forth with the user, but if the user seems confused about a certain topic or expresses confusion, try and double down on that area until they're satisfied. Meaning, ideally, the custom GPT is instructed to say, hey, are you happy now? Or do you think you got it enough? Or do you want me to go another route? So creating that experience where the custom GPT organically offers up diving deeper versus having the user having to ask that themselves. So the core differentiator with this one is that you're designing the experience to be more about reciprocity and being proactive with the user experience, where the other ones are more so, how do you dial in the response? How do you increase the likelihood that you get the output they're looking for? So behind door number 4, we have a document analysis system. And this is something that a lot of folks ask for because the idea of uploading 15 files and saying, learn this and then help me do some analysis is very tempting and appealing. Now, the most common use cases where this is applicable is when you want some form of review. Think resume reviews, think legal reviews, think any document like a contract that has a typical process of looking for key, let's say, clauses or pain points and addressing them or at least highlighting them. The way you structure this one is you say something like, you are a document reviewer, your job is to evaluate and suggest improvements for whatever you're talking about. And then examples to learn from. In this case, instead of uploading 10 to 15 different files and saying, hey, learn from all the comments I wrote down on this document, the ideal scenario is that you provide small snippets of saying, hey, here are the types of things that I want you to focus on, maybe in quotes, clause this, clause that. And if you want to go, again, more fancy, you can write a little rationale under it saying, I would pull this out because XYZ of importance. And then you provide maybe 3 to 5 examples of that, and that's the core part of your actual underlying prompt. And then depending on the document here, when it comes to instructions for AI, you want to tell it the structure that it should expect, so it kind of briefed on it and warmed up on it before it sees it. And then ideally, you can go into what the next thing is. Is it just that you're going to analyze it and pull out some clauses? After the clauses are pulled out, maybe is the user going to confirm that they're happy with it before the LLM knows the next step? These are the questions that you need to answer when you're designing and creating a mental model for how this will work. One super helpful tip for this one is try and space out the different requests to the LLM. So instead of saying, hey, take this document and then turn it into all these social media posts and then write me some form of email, and you have like tons of next steps in one shot, try and space them out saying, hey, when we upload the file, first thing I want you to do is extract all the clauses that denote or are related to X. After I confirm that I'm happy with those, then I want you to put together a small brief saying all of the different things that I want you to outline that we want to highlight in the contract. And then I would have it more piecemeal. And the reason why, if we go back to the premise, is if these LLMs are probabilistic, meaning they try to predict whether or not the answer they're outputting is correct. If you try to shove way too many instructions or actions into one shot, the likelihood that you get a jack of all trades that is deep enough for your satisfaction is very low. So ideally, maybe you do things that are related. So output all the social media posts from this document. Then once I'm happy with it, put together some form of content calendar to then organize them. And then you keep going step by step. And if you isolate it in this way, every step is contained, meaning the likelihood that you get the outcome or the output you're looking for is much higher. Now we're approaching door number 5. Now this one's called Hotkey-Based Interactive Assistant, and this is not a real name, I made it up, but what it denotes is a very different way of actually structuring your prompts. If you remember on door number 2, we mentioned these conversation starters. But I did say if you have 1 to 4, because that's kind of the limit you can have on the front end, at least as of today. What if you have 7 different operations you want to execute? That's where this hotkey method is super helpful. Because instead of saying, hey, refer to conversation starter, you can say, when the user writes W or writes I, execute this. And these are the things that you should execute when you see that hotkey. Now, how do you inform the user of what those hotkeys mean? What you would do is create a main menu. So it's easier to actually show you than tell you. So if I say, let's create a quick custom GPT here. I'll go to Explore GPTs, Create, and I'll open another window just for laziness. If we say something like, can you create a menu of hotkeys where different keys denote different actions? A, write me a poem. B, write me an email. C, talk to me about meaning of life. D, teach me how to write prompts. Okay, so if we wrote something like this and we say add an emoji to each and just make it look pretty. So here's a hotkey menu, okay? And then what we can do is we can take this and then in a custom GPT, we can make our conversation starter main menu. And then you can say when the user says main menu, display the following, okay? And then what I'll do is I'll just take these out and put them at the bottom. So let's just full screen this to make this easier. So I'm going to put the what these do in a separate section, just so they're segmented, and just so I can tell it, hey, verbatim output these in the main menu. Okay, and then I'll just remove the spaces here, and I'll say when the user sends any of these letters, execute the following. Okay, and if we just close this as is without even prompt engineering much more, let's do main menu. And you'll see here you have A, B, C, and D. If we say D, right, now it's become a proxy or a shortcut for adding in a layer prompt. And you can imagine you can make this a lot more sophisticated. Imagine under A, you can say, when the user types A, right? And you can have tons of detail under this saying like, talk about, I don't know, the color blue. Say it in one sentence. And all these sub restrictions that you can do. And now you're basically nesting and organizing your prompt in a way where, one, it's easy for the user to utilize it, and it's easy for you to create these different distinct sections where you nest all your additional logic and asks. This is, again, another way to space out your requests and dial in to make sure that you have a very consistent experience from menu item to menu item. Now we're getting to the door that you've been waiting for, which is door number 6, which is multi-agent custom GPT. And the reason why I call it multi-agent is I recorded a video that many of you seemed to like a few weeks ago where I showed you how to create 7 or 8 mini different agents that you can then call using the @ in a normal ChatGPT session. Now, a few of you in the comments called out, hey, could you create one custom GPT that had multiple functions within it itself? And the answer to that is a big yes, which is how I created that demo at the beginning of the video. So this prompt design is wildly different. You have a role assignment if you wish. It's actually not important that you have one here. The most important thing is that you call out all the different functions you have, where you put them in these little asterisks like this. So I can say, let's go to a custom GPT that I've actually put together to make it easy to understand. So if we go to edit GPT here, and we go to custom actions, and I scroll to the very bottom, you'll see that this action is called submit proposal email details. Okay. So what I like to do in these prompts to make it easier is I call it out by name, right? So you can see when you have these inputs, send them and trigger response proposal email. So I call the name of the function in these single quotes, and that helps it understand, hey, when you hear this thing or when you see this thing sent to you, trigger this function that does XYZ. So if we go back, it's not about necessarily examples to learn from in terms of like knowledge, but more so maybe provide it tidbits of instructions saying, hey, when the user says something like this, or this, then invoke this function that we've created in our custom actions. And if you're not familiar with what custom actions are, they're pretty much a way for you to access the backend of third-party tools from a custom GPT, which make it much more powerful than just using the mundane prompts and knowledge-based files that you're typically used to using. It basically allows your custom GPT to unlock new skills that aren't embedded within the ChatGPT framework as it is today. Now, the custom GPT I'm going to show you is called Jack of all trades GPT. So in this case, it is attached to 4 different tools. One is using make.com, an automation workflow tool, to connect to a Google Calendar anytime I ask for a new schedule or a new meeting to be created. Then we have Anthropic that allows us to speak to PDFs dynamically by just uploading any Google Drive file and having it talk to very complex PDFs, which I also recorded a whole video on. And then we've hooked up 2 new tools, which I haven't spoken about before, which are Firecrawl and Mem0. Firecrawl allows you to dynamically scrape websites. So when you put a URL in, it's very good at quickly scraping that and outputting everything that's on that web page. And when it comes to Mem0, that's actually the memory thing in the demo that I showed you, where you can log memories in a database and you can segment it by user. So imagine you have Mark, you have Jim, you have Sarah. Each one of us would be able to submit our own memories to this database. And when we talk to that Jarvis, we can say, hey, can you give me all my memories? It's Sarah. So it's a cool new tool I actually stumbled on this week. So I thought I'd integrate it to show you how it works. And at a high level, this is how the custom GPT will work. We'll have memory management where we can search memories, add memories, etc. We'll have the ability to scrape URLs and process that through Firecrawl. For Google Calendar events, we'll be able to gather event details, but more so create a brand new event. That's the core goal of the actual GPT as it is. And the last one is to be able to upload PDFs that are more complex and have it handle that all within the realm of one custom GPT. So I think the time has come. Let's go into GPT and see how the Jack of all trades GPT was constructed. So if we go behind the curtains here and go to my edit GPT and then pop this up, I'll read most of the prompt with you just so you get a sense for how I structured it. So you are a multifunctional assistant capable of managing memories, scraping data, creating calendar events, and analyzing PDF documents. Follow these instructions based on the user's input. And basically, for memory management, I do have those little hotkeys if I want to use them. But in general, if you go down here, I've segmented it by function. So if I say, hey, here's all the stuff you need to know about the memory management system based on all the custom actions I've created. And then this is an example interaction. So if I say this hotkey, this is what you should ask me for. The user ID, is it Mark's memories, Sarah's memories, Robert's memories, and then the actual query or question you have about those memories. With web scraping, the prompt is what URL would you like to scrape, and then provide the whole URL. And then I basically tell it for each one of these sections, what do you need from me as the user to make sure that you can do your job? With the Google Calendar event creator, basically I'm giving it a framework for what are the things that are required. Ideally, you want a start and an end date for a meeting invite, right? Because you can't just have it all day. And for Google Calendar, you can see here, we have a few things that are optional, like attendees or reminder settings. But the one thing that I have, or a couple things that we have that are required, are the name of the meeting, when the meeting is, and the duration, which is the standard things you'd need to actually put together a meeting. On the make.com side, I have this webhook that I'm sending the request to, and I'll show you what that looks like right now. So if we go into make and we go into this calendar update, it is an unbelievably simple automation. The hard part is basically just structuring the request from custom GPT to make sure that we're getting the different aspects here, which is the name, the attendees, etc. So we know where to plug it in. And if we go into here, you can see that we have the calendar connected and what you have to do. And I'll show you basically how to structure this, how to put it together, all in a video in the description below. Just to save some airtime on this video, I'll walk you through how to set this up yourself, but pretty much the crash course is you sign in using Google, assuming you have a Google account, and then you just sync your calendar ID, which will be available if you have it linked up. And then I just put in, this is the event name, this is the start name, and I'm getting all of these from this webhook or ear that we've set up to listen for ChatGPT's request. So we basically just like drag and drop start, end, the description of the event, the location of the event, any attendees. I just put the attendees here so you can add multiple people to the event. And then at the bottom, you can configure it so this meeting has a Google Meet invite already embedded within it, which is a super cool feature. So all we did is just hook this up to the Jack of all trades custom GPT. And then in here, there we go, we just have a reminder, at least I've put one out of paranoia, that this is what you should be doing. And it also has a little piece of feedback here, which says like, if it's a success, say created successfully, otherwise saying invalid data, check your inputs. And this is an example interaction that I have here. And the last one, again, I've gone through this specific automation in detail in another video that you can watch. It's the PDF analysis API from Claude, which allows you to upload more complex documents, let's say more on the visual first side versus having words, where it can actually take screenshots in real time and analyze what's in them. So I've basically enabled that through this prompt as well, and then told it an example interaction, which is when I say analyze this PDF, ask me ideally for the Google Drive link that I want. And then I love to end with general notes saying, always guide users through required inputs, validate data formats, provide clear error messages, combine clarity with efficiency for a seamless user experience. So these are more so for the gentrification of the back and forth. Now, that's the prompt and that's the underlying brain. What I've enabled to make that Jarvis experience possible is a few things. So if we go back to my slides here, my little Easter egg is that I figured out how to avoid having that constant confirm or deny pop up when you hook up a custom action. So in this case, there is one line of code here that you can add to a schema. And a schema is basically the map of all the different functionalities of a custom GPT that are outlined here. So if I go into one of these settings, this is a schema. This tells ChatGPT or custom GPT, here are all the different functionalities you have. Here are the keys you need to go access this third party to do whatever I want you to do. If you go back, if we add this X OpenAI is consequential false, this helps us get a different pop-up. Instead of confirm and deny, it'll say allow or always allow. And if you're in the front end, you can click on always allow, and then it shouldn't bother you every single time you make a request, which is something you must be used to, and I've been used to, even on this channel, hitting constantly. Naturally, this allows you to have that Jarvis experience. So if we go back here, we have these 4 custom actions. And if you're looking at this saying, oh my gosh, I have no idea how I implement this, this all is going to be available for you in the Gumroad link in the description below. You're going to have all the schemas, the prompt, as well as this bad boy here, my custom GPT templates, where you can go through all the templates I showed you, but a bit more in depth with an actual prompt template that I've put for you. So I'm trying to set you up for success to be able to create the custom GPT of your dreams. Now, if we go back, the main thing here is that these 3, this one, and this one, I've built on Replit. And the reason why I keep using Replit is if you try to connect these services individually and create a different schema for each one, sometimes you'll run into some headaches where you don't know how to enter your API key, which you'd enter here. Are you going to use a normal API key? Do you have to click on this thing called bearer? Is it a custom header? Some of these really cool tools have very poor documentation on where you put the keys to be able to access the service. So when I create services in Replit and then I hook that up, one, that lets me have very consistent schemas, meaning I can take one of these schemas, put it into ChatGPT, give it a new piece of code and say, hey, replicate this, and then allows me to easily bridge it and just put the URL of the actual Replit app that I end up deploying. And if you don't know what that Replit is, in my original video that I did a few weeks ago on how to create these different custom agents, I went into depth on how to actually set these up. Now the rest of these look very similar, and if you don't know what our memories even is, I'll show you what the front end of this tool is, as well as Firecrawl, so you're more familiar with what we're even talking about. But these are all going to be similar except for this one. This one is the make automation that connects to the Google Calendar. And this is the webhook that we've created to be able to speak to and access make.com. And if you're completely confused how to even go about generating this, let alone the rest of this, I'll also have this covered in a video in the description below. Now, these 4 components are what allow us to actually have this Jarvis experience. And if we go into any one of them here, you'll see that if I do a little search, you'll see I've added this line that I just promised you in the slides called X OpenAI is consequential false. Based on my understanding, it means that this is not a secure operation that you need to protect by constantly saying confirm or deny. So when you enable this, the first time you use your custom GPT, it will ask you, hey, do you want to allow or disallow? But once you click always allow, you should be enabled to talk to it back and forth and not deal with that constant confirmation. All right. And now if we go into Mem0, this is what it looks like if you want to check out the tool. You can use it for free up to a certain limit, like all of these AI tools. And if you see here, if I go and click on a specific user, let's refresh and let's click into Mark here, you'll see we just added this at the beginning of this video. Mark is very mediocre at building custom GPTs, and you have all of these different memories. And what's cool about it is it auto tags those memories with different tags that you can also look up as well if you want to go down the rabbit hole. You can go into the playground here and say things like, remember that I love my husky named Moon. And then once you save that, if it doesn't exist in the memory, then it will add it to your memory. There you go. And then it will remember that. And then you can change users. So if we go back here to the playground, I believe, or yeah, users, I could create a brand new user and just say, hey, I want to now store Sarah. And for Sarah, here are her memories. And she can enter them herself through the custom GPT or the platform itself. And you can also imagine this as not just users, but also possibly locations. So imagine you have a franchise and you have 5 or 6 different locations, you could theoretically add location number 1, South San Francisco, and then North San Francisco, and then each one of those would have different memories that have different procedures or opening and closing hours, any form of detail that you don't necessarily want the ChatGPT memory to know, or because in a custom GPT right now, memories updating are not enabled. This is a way to get around that if you want to be able to take advantage of memories within a custom GPT experience. All right, so that's Mem 0. If we go into Firecrawl, it's unbelievably straightforward. They're really good at scraping websites and then putting the actual website into a markdown format. So if we just go to my website, Prompt Advisors, and we take that and we go into Firecrawl and then paste this and say start for free. In my case, I'll have a paid account, but you'll be able to send, I think, up to 500 requests on a free account. And you'll see here, it scrapes the entire website and it puts it into Markdown to make it large language model friendly. So if you give it to ChatGPT, it will like this format a lot more. So I'm basically just accessing this service, but through their API, where I've created some code in Replit using Python, where I'm connecting this API key and then hooking that up to our jack of all trades automation. So that is the Mem 0, that is the Firecrawl, and Cloud PDF. Again, just watch that video if you're not familiar with that specific function. But the TLDR, if we want to go to Claude, is this API came out a few weeks ago, and it allows you to speak to much more beefy PDFs that are more maybe image heavy than text heavy and don't have a lot of explanations, where it can take that analysis to the next level. All right, so with all that out of the way, in terms of actually interacting with it after updating all of this, if we go and ask for all memories, I'll show you what we can do on the desktop. So what you want to do as a shortcut is go to this drop down, go to privacy settings, and then you see how all of these are set to ask? I can say always allow, always allow, always allow, and then always allow. And then when I close this and I say, provide me with Mark's memories, sometimes it'll still pop up one more time, but in this case, because I've enabled it from the actual top, it didn't ask me to confirm or deny, which is my hallelujah moment that I've been looking for months, which is how do you figure this out? And on mobile, this is slightly different, but if you want to be able to use that chat interface with voice, you can't access that on the desktop app. You can only do that on the actual mobile app. So I'm just going to screen record from my actual phone, and then I'll show you here, and I'll make sure my editing team puts it on screen. So what you want to do on a phone, and I'm going to screen record right now, and then I'll have my editing team put it on screen side by side, is you want to click on Jack of all trades in this case, and then click on See Details, and then you want to go to Privacy and Safety, click on Actions, and then you can see here they've all been set to always from my desktop. So basically the mobile has inherited the desktop, and this is instrumental for me being able to have that seamless conversational experience, because otherwise what happens is it'll say, okay, it seems like this app is trying to send a request to a third party. Do you allow this? And sometimes when you say it on audio, it doesn't work as well. So once you've enabled everything, you'll be able to have conversations via the desktop app. You'll be able to use the old version of voice on the mobile app if you choose to do so. And now you'll be able to do things like create calendar invites. So if I pull up my Jack of all trades once again, hey, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. What's on your mind?
Yeah, could we create a calendar invite for next Friday, November 22nd, for 10 a.m. EST, and call it Stand Up, and make it with my colleague Taha?
Sure. Can you share Taha's email address so I can include him in the invite?
Yeah, it's taha@promptadvisors.com.
The calendar invite for Stand Up has been created successfully for next Friday, November 22nd at 10 a.m. EST with Taha included. Let me know if you need any changes.
Amazing. So if we go to my calendar here, you'll see it's put together a stand-up, it's invited Taha, and it's already set up a Google Meet, all from an audio on the mobile app. So if you don't think that's cool, then clearly I'm alone. But to me, that creates really powerful experiences because, again, building on my last video, what happens when you build multiple of these very potent multi-agent GPTs, and then you can call on each one. So now you have the power of 4 to 5 functions within one GPT, and now you can call an army of them by just going into a brand new session and saying, hey, Jack of all trades, I need you to handle XYZ thing. And now that you can invoke something like Jack of all trades or multiple Jack of all trades, you can become the master of your business by offloading all these mundane tasks and being able to do so using a very pretty front-end experience. Now, to prevent this video from getting any longer, I again threw all the resources on how to set everything up that I showed you, including the schemas, the automations, as well as the underlying prompts, as well as my deck, and the handy dandy Notion template. And if you so choose to support the channel when you see that Gumroad link, I'd love you and appreciate it. Let me know in the comments down below if you found this interesting or helpful. It helps the channel, it helps the video, and I'd super appreciate it. I'll see you next time.